welcome back, everybody. This is Troy Fullwood with Propelio Academy and Pinnacle Investments. And so that last session was the bomb. And what I mean by that is that dealing with partials is one of those areas where so many things can happen. And hopefully that was one of the takeaways from that last session when you look at it like, wow, this is like a lot of moving pieces. And I wanted to bring it back down to what I call best practices. And I can tell you as a whole, in the last 23 years now, and over 15,000 transactions, 99% of what we do is full purchases. And you can kind of see why after you hear about how partials work. And I'm not saying they aren't used in the industry, and I'm not saying they don't have value. That's not what I'm saying. But what I found to be in our business and how we've grown our business over the years is we figured out a niche in the marketplace that we kind of have set up shop, and that's what we focus in on. That doesn't mean that all the other ideas don't have possibilities. But when I'm building a business, and you should be thinking about this as well, you want to use things that are going to give you the best return for your effort. And so I've found that buying fulls, it's cleaner, it's easier. Yes, it's a bigger discount to the seller, but most of the time the seller doesn't care what the discount is as long as it's fair and reasonable so that they can accomplish their why. Now, that being said, I want to take you over here to the screen and I want to share with you how I get to their why. And when I'm talking to a seller on the phone and having a conversation with them, the number one thing I'm talking to that seller about is learning about them. And how I go about learning about them is really simple. I ask these things called questions. Okay? I just ask them questions about what it is that they're doing. What is it? How did they create this note? So if I'm talking to somebody, say, from a Craigslist ad, I'm asking them about the house that they're selling. When did they buy it? What did they do to it? How long have they owned it? Those types of questions. So here in front of me, we've got what's called the Mortgage Note Submission Worksheet. This is my script. This is my 23-year script for talking to note sellers on the phone. Now, some people may say, well, don't you have this beautiful flow chart thing and doing all these things and pages I got to flip through and ask questions on because I'm talking to the seller and I got to run to page 23. No, I don't have any of those things. Why? Because I'm too lazy to write it up. I got this one sheet worksheet that works great, and like my mom says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so we're going to roll with this, and I'm going to share with you exactly what it is we do. So starting from the top, broker/principal information. So I would use that. Obviously, if you're brokering the deal or wholesaling the deal, you know your own information. So I would use that to put in the principal information, meaning who's the seller? What's their name? Did they do this through a company? What's the date today? What's their address? What's their address? Not the property address, their address. City, phone, state, zip. What's their cell phone number? Do they have a fax machine? Do they have an email? Where would you put email on it? I don't know, write it above submission worksheet. Write it on the side, write it horizontal, vertical, whatever you want to do. Gather information, their contact information. Okay? Some of that stuff you might have. But I would also ask the question, what's the best phone number to reach you at in case there's another one other than the one I called them at? Okay? Because sometimes you call one number, they'll answer, but really they have a better number called a cell phone or something along those lines. So I fill it in with that type of information. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, right? This isn't rocket science. We're not curing cancer here. And here's why I say that. Remember what I said about this industry being, analytical people wanting to kind of dissect things and break things down and do that stuff? Well, here's the thing. You saw the software I used. It literally took me, 30 seconds to a minute to figure out what the yield was on something? The most important part of the business is really about finding out who your customer is, who your seller is. What's going to motivate them? Why are they going to sell this? They may say, hey, I'm not interested in selling it. Leave me alone. I've had those kind of conversations as well. Guess what? You can't change their mind. Okay? You're not going to change that person's mind. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe they're having a bad week. Maybe they're having a bad year. Who knows? But at the end of the day, you're not going to come up with some magical statement that gets them to love you all of a sudden. So don't try and waste your time into that. Just work with people that want to be worked with. In other words, work with buyers or work with sellers that want to sell, okay, that are motivated. That's what's going to put money in your pocket, not mathematically figuring out things. Because here's the thing, and I'm kind of going back a little bit, those mathematical formulas, those are just pro formas. Those are just projections. That's all they are. I don't know what's going to happen with that buyer in 12 months any more than you do. And the minute something happens, it's going to change. But does it give us an idea? Absolutely. It's kind of like driving on Interstate 10, me taking my kids to Disneyland. The only thing I care about is the kids having fun. But I know that getting on Interstate 10 and heading to Disneyland, there's probably going to be a few accidents. There might be some traffic congestion. There might be weather-related issues. And when those things happen, I'm going to have to steer around those, or I'm going to have to navigate through those things when I get there. But it doesn't stop me from getting on I-10 to take my kids to Disneyland. Just like it doesn't stop me to buy the deal because of what might happen 2 or 3 years down the road. Back to this. So this is my script. Real estate information. I want to know what the property address is. Street address, county, city, state, zip. Current estimated value. Have they done a BPO? Have they done an appraisal on the property? If so, how much was it? When did they do it? They may have done it last week. They may have done it last year. Those things are not known until you ask those questions. If they haven't done anything, but they've got a value, say, based on tax rolls, that's often a pretty common one if they haven't done anything. Well, as a whole, nationwide, we know that tax rolls tend to be a little bit lower than what the real property value is. But nonetheless, this is not a conversation based on a subpoena, okay? Nobody swore to oath to, give the most accurate testimony possible. They're just telling you what they know, and it's your job to identify that all the information is as accurate as humanly possible in what I call step 1 of the process. When we get into due diligence, we'll verify all of these things. What kind of property is it? Residential, single family, owner occupied, multifamily, rental. Okay, multifamily could also be under commercial as well. But 1 to 4 units are sometimes referred to as multifamily, oftentimes referred to as fourplexes as well. But it could be a multifamily, say a 5-plex or a 6-plex or an 8-plex or a 12-plex. All you're doing is taking down information, notes for your benefit, as well as if you're bringing the deal to me to buy, for my benefit, so that you and I can have an intelligent conversation about this deal. It might be vacant land. It might be single family, double wide or single wide or condo or townhouse. All of that stuff needs to be written down. If you're one of those people that likes to take notes off on the side of the page, take notes off on the side of the page. But before you send it over, clean up your handwriting so I can read it. A lot of people out there are practicing doctors, and that's great, but clean it up so I can understand what you did as well. And I know why people do that. I do it as well. When I'm talking to a seller, I'm excited. I'm excited to hear what they're doing. I'm excited, so I'm writing stuff down on the side, and I'll come back and straighten things out after I hang up with them. Vacant land, description. Description of real estate property and area. So if I ask them, well, single-family residential, how many rooms? Oh, it's got 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, 2-car garage on an acre of land, horse property, RV garage, casita, I'm writing all of that down to get an understanding of what it is that we're looking at as a whole, okay? Then I go into, so Mr. Smith, I see here that you've got this note. I appreciate our conversation thus far. Let me back up a little bit here because I'm looking at the description of real estate, property, and area. One of the other questions you can ask in there is, have you done any improvements to the property? So if you're talking to somebody like on Craigslist, professional rehabber, ask them, what have you done to this property? Oh, you wouldn't believe what we did. Man, we did this, and we put on a new roof and new outside paint, inside paint, hardwood flooring, cabinets, appliances, water heater, coated the garage floor, re-poured the concrete driveway, we leveled the house. Whatever it is they did. And write all those things down so it gives you an idea of how much work they really put into that house. Just kind of FYI, and I'll come back to that later on as to why that's important. Historical information, date of sale. When did they sell it? Selling price, how much they sell it for? Down payment, how much do they get for a down payment? What's the first lien? AKA, oftentimes what they're going to tell you at that point is, hey, the first lien's $90,000. Okay, so you sold it for $100,000, you got $10,000 down, first lien's $90,000. Now you'll see there's room for a second lien. Hey, did you happen to carry a second lien on this property? Nope, they gave me $10,000 cash. That was good enough for me. Fantastic. Just put a 0 in there. Now here's where this gets tricky. See over here to the right, prior mortgage information? That's when you ask the question, Mr. Smith, do you have any underlying liens on this property? That's when they tell what's going on. Now that's a good thing. Okay, that's a good thing because that equips you to have a better understanding of what's here. But more importantly, they're going to tell you whether they borrowed money from mom and dad's IRA, whether they borrowed money from friends and family, neighbors, whether they borrowed money from B of A, or they've owned the house for 10 years and they owed Wells Fargo $40,000. They're going to tell you if there's an underlying lien on that property, whether it's hard money, private money, institutional money. Great, Mr. Smith, how much do you owe? Well, we owe, $50,000. Fantastic. Is that based on what? Well, it's based on the last payment I sent to him. That's what the statement said. Perfect. So we're plus or minus. And you just want to get close. You don't have to be 100%. You just want to get close. Why is that? You'll see why that is here in just a minute. Then you jump back over to note information. What do we have under note information? We have date of the note. Date of the sale and date of the note can be sometimes the same date or they can be two different dates. The amount. Well, if it's a $90,000 note, we kind of know that. We can put that in there. We don't have to be redundant in our questions. We can answer our own questions sometimes. Term and notes. What A and B? A is the, if there's a balloon, okay, which sometimes is the case. Prior to Dodd-Frank, there's still a lot of notes in the marketplace that were pre-Dodd-Frank. They'll have a balloon on them, say 84-month balloon on a 360-month term, okay? A lot of people kind of got away from balloons for a lot of reasons, but primarily Dodd-Frank defining that. But at the end of the day, it's neither here nor there. You're focused on this particular deal. What's the payment amount? Is there a balloon amount? If there is, put it in there. If there's not, 0, 0. Payment date or balloon date, 0. Payment amount, 0. Interest rate. What's the interest rate? Well, it is whatever it is. 7%, 8%, 9%. That's the interest rate. When was the first payment made? So typically speaking, if they closed on, say, May 1st, then their first payment might be due June 1st. Oftentimes you'll see in the seller finance environment, they'll close like the middle of the month and the payment will be due like in 45 days or it'll be due in like 15 days. Well, technically speaking, the majority of that payment should be applied to principal and not interest, but it doesn't always work out that way. And it's not a deal killer by any stretch of the imagination. But breaking it down, you only got 15 days worth of interest, but you've got a full 30 days worth of payment. Hence, more of it goes to principal versus interest, and that'll shift your first payment principal balance very quickly. Most sellers don't follow that rule of thumb, and at the end of the day, it's not a deal killer. Even in our space, we'll just accept it the way it is, and we'll move on. Date of the first payment, due date of the first payment. So, like I said, June 1st. Number of payments made. How many have they made? Well, this example we've used today, 24 payments. They've got 336 payments left. Next payment due July 1st. Balance is whatever the balance is. Now, one of the questions I'll ask in the balance column is, especially if it's a well-seasoned note, say 24 months or greater, have there been any principal reductions? Like has the borrower come along and got a big tax return and they gave you an extra $5,000? Or they inherited some money and they gave you an extra $10,000? I'll ask those kinds of questions just to make sure that it hasn't, shifted it off of a normal amortization schedule. If they have, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We just need to make sure that that the home buyer gets proper credit and that the seller is working off an actual or accurate balance of the note. So jumping back over to the right side here, prior mortgage information, we covered that. Payer credit score with SS number and copy of the note. Okay, so if the borrower, or let me rephrase this, if the seller pulled credit, we want to get the Social Security number on the borrower. We want to get the Social Security number on the borrower so that we can in turn pull credit on the borrower. Now we do a soft pull on the borrower. As an investor, the Fair Debit Credit Collection Act of 1970, 601A28 allows me as an investor, don't quote me on that, I have to go back and revisit that, allows me as an investor to pull credit on an investment that involves another party if my intention is to purchase that. Well, obviously my intention is to purchase this, and I need to know who's on the other side as a whole. Now, if they have the Social Security number and they can pull credit and they can send me a copy of the credit report, then that's great, but that gets a little hairy because you're not supposed to do those kinds of things. Hence why you want to set up your own, credit pulling application. You want to get with a third-party vendor that will allow you to do those things in this. If you don't have that or you don't want to take on that responsibility, I completely understand it. Whoever's buying the note from you will have the capacity to do that. You just need to give them a copy of the note, the closing statement, and the Social Security numbers, and let them run credit on your behalf and the seller's behalf. And it keeps you, out of trouble across the board. Okay? No, you don't need a authorization to pull credit on this at all. Okay? Seller's motivation and need. What is the seller's motivation and need? Well, what are they going to do with the money? That's what we want to know from them. What do you plan to do with this money? Well, I want to buy a new boat. My wife wants to go to Europe for a month. My kid just got accepted into Harvard. I need to pay some college tuition. We want to buy, a beach house. Whatever it is, it is. I want to know what their motivation is. I want to know what their why is so that I can help support them in accomplishing that, hands down. I'll ask them questions. Do you have a copy of the note, the security instrument, which is the mortgage? Title. Was there a title policy done on this? Did you do an owner's policy or a lender's policy? Okay, two totally different things. Okay, a lender's policy is all I care about as a note buyer, and as a note seller, actually note creator, a lender's policy is all they care about. An owner's policy goes to the home owner who bought the property. Now, at the end of the day, that typically doesn't get done. They typically would do a lender's policy and then not an owner's policy, and people do that to cut corners. They do that to save an extra $100 or $150, whatever the title company is going to charge them. I don't necessarily think that's the best rule of thumb, but I also understand $150 is $150. In the world of finance, $150 is nothing in a $100,000 deal. See my point there? Sales contract. Do they have a copy of the sales contract? Was there ever a sales contract on this deal? Do they have a copy of the payer's credit report? Okay. A closing statement, bill of sale, insurance, private mortgage info. I ask these questions to plant the seed that, hey, these are going to be things that we're going to need. If we agree on pricing, I'm going to need this stuff from you. So it'd be probably in good spirits if you start working on gathering this stuff together, because if we can agree on pricing, then I'm going to need you to hand that stuff over so I can get to work as a whole. You'll see over here, quote to the seller. This is something that a buyer would what a buyer would put in here. Okay, if you sent this over to me, I would price the total note back at X dollars. I probably wouldn't do a partial on it because, like I said, 98, 99% of the deals we do are fulls. I wouldn't necessarily waste the time to do that unless it was actually requested. If you put in there buy 60 payments, I would, price it back to you, whatever 60 payments are. But I would also look to see what the underlying liens are on the property to see if 60 payments are really going to work. Sometimes there's that disconnect. On the very bottom, you see seller's pricing expectation for the sale of this note. This is what I would call the golden question, okay? And I call it the golden question because oftentimes people are trying to figure out, well, just give me a price and I'll take the price back to the seller. Well, although I understand that logic, that way of thinking, what I also understand is you could ultimately spin your wheels with that seller or a lot of sellers who have an idea that, hey, I'll sell this note, but I want 95 cents on the dollar. I want 99 cents on the dollar. I want 92 cents on the dollar. Most seller finance deals, first lien residential SFR owner-occupied deals, sell anywhere between about 68 to about 87%. That's kind of what their sweet spot is. What dictates the range, whether it's an A or a C class type note, down payments, interest rate, creditworthiness, so on and so on. With that being said, if your seller's giving you numbers that are, I've even had a lot of sellers say, I want par pricing, which means I want the entire balance, the entire unpaid principal balance. Well, that doesn't work in our business. Why doesn't it work? Well, real simply. If I give you $88,000, using the example from the earlier episodes, if I give you $88,000 for this note, and 3 months later the homeowner decides to refinance this note or refinance their property, or they sell their property, they're going to look to me to get a payoff. Well, I have to give them, legally, I have to give them a payoff. And their payoff's going to be like $88,000, $87,950 after a couple more payments. So I didn't make any money, but I still have the cost and the overhead of running the business that has to come out of that. So it's still the same amount of work, but then you don't make any money. So that's why partials don't work. Oftentimes, or not partials, that's why par pricing doesn't work, because I can't make any money. And by the way, neither can you. If you're wholesaling this deal, you don't get to make any money either. So keep that in mind as well. Finding out what the seller's pricing expectation is critical for hitting the target. Okay, critical for hitting the target. If you think about it, every single thing that we're involved in our lives every single day have a price tag on it. If I want to go on the MLS today and start looking for houses here in Dallas while I'm here, guess what? They're going to tell me what the asking price of that house is. Then it's up to me to determine if that's a price I'm willing to pay, yes or no. If I go to the grocery store to go get some food, I'm going to be walking up and down the aisles, and there's these things called price tags underneath everything on the shelves, and I get to determine whether or not I want to have that at that price or this at that price. Same thing is with clothes, cars, so on and so on. So notes are no different, but oftentimes people will say, well, just give me the best price possible. And that will lead to what I would call a very vicious cycle where you'll spend a lot of time and not be able to meet the seller's expectations, because oftentimes the seller's expectation is above what the market will bear as a whole. And I don't fault them for that. It's not they're doing anything wrong or illegal or immoral. It's just that they think that their deal's worth X. Well, here's what their deal's really worth. Here's what that piece of real estate's really worth. Here's what that car's really worth. Here's what that building's really worth. What somebody will pay for it. That's what it's really worth at the end of the day. So anything outside of that doesn't mean anything. What am I willing to pay for this? Well, based on my cost of capital, my yield, my margins, paying somebody, to find the deal for me, so on and so on, I'm willing to pay X, because my return is essentially fixed. Like, I can't go in here and add value to a note. Like, if I buy a house over here for $50,000, I can throw 20 into it, and now all of a sudden it's worth $100,000. See, I can't do that with a note as a whole. So this is my script. This is what I use. I've used this for 23 years. I have a stack of these in a folder on my desk. Every time I get on the phone with a seller, this is what I pull out. After all of these years, I'm still asking the same questions. It's a different seller. It's a different note, a property buyer. It's a different note characteristics, but I ask the same questions and they give me different answers, and then I can in turn serve them at the highest level possible. That's how we do it. That's how we gather information. That's how we put things together and ask great questions about their deals, learn about their deals, and then be able to put something together that makes sense. If they tell me in turn that, hey, I want par pricing and I'm not going to sell it unless I get par pricing, then I know that that's a very short-lived conversation and that it's time for me to go talk to somebody else. Okay, there's no magical potion that I can wave over that to get them to, budge. I may get them to budge, say, to 97, but there's still no money in that deal for me or for you. It's just like the people that you run into that are out there wanting to sell their house and they think their house is worth $50,000 and you're looking at it and it's not worth $20,000, but they're not budging on it. It may just require you to leave them alone for 6 months or a year and then come back and talk to them. Maybe they'll have a change of heart. I've seen it happen a lot of times in notes as well. So that being said, thank you so much for spending this episode with me, and we'll come back to you guys with the next episode here shortly. Take care. Bye now.